Hi, and welcome to the Starseed Kitchen Podcast. I'm your host, Chef Whitney Aronoff, and today I am grateful to have Liz. I'm going to say your last name wrong again, Liz. Liz Riffle.
Riffle. Yep, you got it.
Thank
Nailed
you.
it.
Rather just get it right coming off the back, and now I just need to practice it. Yeah,
Perfect.
pronunciation of someone's name and their farm is very important, so I apologize for that. So Liz Riffle is our guest today on the Starseed Kitchen Podcast, and she is the owner with her husband of Riffle Farms. Riffle Farms raises grass-fed and finished bison tucked in the hills of Preston County, West Virginia, where the grasses are cool and the snow is heavy. Owner and operators Liz Riffle is a U.S. Navy Nurse Corps veteran, and her husband Jimmie is currently still serving on active duty as a Navy Nurse Corps nurse practitioner. Liz is an animal lover first and foremost, and an agent for natural community. She is committed to honest meat and changing the current meat processing system our nation relies on. I'm pausing because I want to make sure that I say the farm correctly again. Riffle.
Yeah.
I know. I'm trying not to say it the other way. Riffle Farms.
It's okay, either way.
Riffle Farms was the first commercial bison operation in the state of West Virginia. They were also the first farm business to field harvest their animals for state certified commercial sale, which is also how Liz's second business, the Honest Carnivore, a West Virginia Meat Collective, was born. Liz has years of supporting work behind her through the Good Meat Project and the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. Riffle Farms is part of a growing movement to facilitate the large-scale regeneration of the world's grasslands and the livelihoods of their inhabitants through holistic management. Regenerative farming and agriculture provides a resilient system to grow food by building soil that will become abundant for man, beasts, and all of nature. The Riffle family chose bison with their intact wildness to help teach us to work with Mother Nature instead of against her. Plus, they are a fabulous, healthy meat. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Liz.
Yeah. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Whitney. I appreciate it.
Well, tell me a little bit more about your background and how you transitioned out of the military and onto a farm in West Virginia.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting story. So I'm actually a registered nurse by trade, and just recently stepped down from doing that position just because we've been so busy on the farm, which has been great that I no longer have to do that. But yeah, so as a nurse, we're healthcare professionals, and health is, front and center of what we do in our daily lives on a regular basis. And you get what you put in type thing. So you are what you eat is very, very true. And so through that process, I myself was trying to eat cleaner and eat better. And while we were traveling around the country, we were eating different meats and things like that. And we were actually stationed out west, actually in Washington State, and did some traveling while we were out there to, Wyoming and Jackson Hole. We love Jackson Hole.
Yeah.
And that's where the buffalo still roam. And out there you can get, a bison steak or a bison burger really at any restaurant. And which is great. It's good meat, good eating. I think I had my first bison short ribs when I was like 15 or something and loved it since then. But so as I got older, I started asking some more questions like, well, where are they getting this bison, right? They're obviously not going out into Yellowstone and shooting these animals and then bringing it to the restaurant. Somebody's raising bison. And so we started asking some questions because we were kind of curious, just because Jimmie and I talk a lot about, kind of what we wanted to do when I got out of the military and when he transitioned and, looked at retirement, stuff like that. And I grew up with horses personally. So I was always really into, I want to get back to the farm and raise our kids with horses and just, get back to that lifestyle. And he was totally into that. But kind of started thinking that, well, maybe we should put something else inside those fences besides horses, because horses are kind of expensive. And I was like, okay, no, that would be great, because then we could have our own meat and things like that. Anyways, that sounds awesome. And so kind of, just having some of these conversations, we started going down, that avenue in regards to, okay, so what are we going to raise? And when we got out to Jackson Hole, we started asking a couple folks at the meat shops, the local meat shops out there, like, okay, where's everybody getting this bison from? Because obviously it's not from Yellowstone. And the guy's like, yeah, I mean, you can raise them. People ranch them, farm them all over the place. You'd be surprised. It's just a little bit of a different technique. And so, from then Jimmie was like, yeah, let's do that. And I was like, okay, I guess we could pull that off. I mean, why not? People do it. So, gosh, I feel like this was in like 2014 or something like that. And so from there, we started asking some questions of ranchers and like, how do you really do this? Is this dangerous? Like, these are wild animals. Like, is this just going to cost me a lot of money type thing? And did some ranch visits and things like that. And from there started to kind of hone in on, yeah, we can totally do this. And Jimmie is born and raised in West Virginia and really wanted to go back home to raise a family and have a farm. And the cost of living super cheap. And there's not a whole lot of rules and regulations in West Virginia, which is super nice. So you're out in the middle of nowhere and nobody really bugs you, and it's kind of nice. So he's like, well, why don't we raise bison in West Virginia? I was like, okay, I mean, yeah, we could do that. And there's not going to be a whole lot of competition because nobody else does that out there.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a good and a bad thing. But it ended up being in our favor, most definitely. So yeah, that's kind of how it kind of unwound. But the really big thing why we really focused on the bison is because of the health profile of that meat. Once we found out that bison actually has less fat in it than chicken, more protein than salmon, and even more omega-3 fatty acids than grass-fed and finished beef, we were like, yeah, hands down, this would be a wonderful meat source to bring to the West Virginia community and the region around us. Because a lot of people are really used to having just beef. So this would really be something different and healthy for the community. So we just ran with it.
So how do you get started when you decide that you want to start a ranch and have animals? So where do you buy bison? And how do you decide like what bison to buy? Because I believe there's North American bison and that there's also European bison. Are there multiple types of bison?
There's definitely a European version, but I want to say that's a great question. I think even the European version nowadays, though, I think those are few and far between. A lot of European nations used to have a European version, and I'm pretty sure a lot of them died out. And now they have the North American version just over there. So, but I could be wrong on that. I'd have to do a little bit more research in that. There's a lot actually going on over in Europe in regards to bringing bison back to that area, especially in Russia and places like that.
Yeah, I was assuming that it was in like Northern Europe.
Yes, yeah, because that's where they would have definitely done very, very well. So, but there's actually a plains bison and a woods bison are the two different kinds that we see here. And the plains bison is your typical big, I mean, looks like a freaking SUV standing in front of you with this giant head, right? Low to the ground, lots of fur and fuzz kind of hanging off them. And then the woods bison looks similar, just is a little bit taller and leaner, and their head's not quite as big. And the theory there is that they think the woods bison would have been in places further up north in Canada, where there were more woods that they would have had to travel through, and technically in places like West Virginia. So bison used to be indigenous to our area, actually. But the thought is that it was probably the woods bison that was there, just because of the hills and hollers that we have. They would have been able to pick through all of that. So we have both. We do have mostly plains bison because those are the easiest ones to come by typically in the United States. But we do have a handful of woods bison. And so we're kind of just playing around with the genetics to see if one does better, on our area than the other. So Yeah, so we'll see.
Do you notice like personality difference or eating differences between them, or any behavioral differences between the two?
No, not yet, honestly. I guess the only difference I see between a plains bison and a woods bison is we have a plains bull, breeder bull, and I have a woods breeder bull. And my woods breeder bull is a lot more athletic than my plains breeder bull. So my plains breeder bull is big, and that's his claim to fame. And most animals don't mess with him because he's so darn big. But my woods bison's starting to give him a little bit more of a run for his money just because he's so agile, because he stands up a little bit taller. So we've actually had to kind of watch it. So we'll see if they need to keep getting along, or else they're going to have to be separated.
So how many bison do you guys have right now?
Yeah, so we have only about 35 right now, which is a pretty small herd comparatively to a lot of ranchers and other farmers. So it kind of ebbs and flows though throughout the year. We've had as many as 45 to 48 animals. And then this year we're really working hard to expand the herd to about 60 to 65. So we've been working with our local Savory Institute hub to do a regenerative, farm plan and all that holistic management and planning, and feel very comfortable now as we've kind of reworked our grazing system, that we can actually have a better carrying capacity, which is what the bison would have done normally. They would have been in very, very large herds and really just grazed everything down and then left it and then came back to it months later, potentially. So that's kind of what we're trying to mimic. And we'll get there. Hopefully we'll be at that 60 range, probably like end of the summer. So but that's another question you'd asked, is where do you get the bison from, right?
Yeah.
So if they're not born on your property, you do have to get them shipped in. And you'd be surprised actually how many bison operations are on the East Coast. So we do get some animals from Ohio. We've gotten some from Kentucky. I've definitely had shipments come in from Canada though. That's where I got a lot of those woods bison. So really, if you can trailer it, usually it's about 13 hours or so they can stay on a trailer. If you can find somebody that has animals, you can get them from about that distance.
So I find that so interesting how the animals actually get to a farm. My aunt is an executive with the United States Postal Office. And so animals are shipped in the mail sometimes. And she's a big animal lover. So she'll send me photos. Sometimes people will be shipping, chickens when before they've hatched, but they'll hatch before they make it to their destination. So the US Postal Office can't continue shipping them. And they have to find a farm or a local animal sanctuary where they have to donate the baby chicks because they aren't able to make it to their destination through the mail.
Oh goodness. Yeah, I can imagine. And that's the season right now too. Everyone's getting all their chicks. So I can only imagine. Yeah.
Is there a season when you get the bison or?
Not really. I mean, you can really get them any time of year. And technically, I think you can get chicks in the mail just about any time of year. You want it to be warm enough though, or not too hot. So, but springtime is when a lot of people get their new chicks, that they either use for laying hens or for meat birds. So,
Got it. So you had briefly mentioned about your bison and working with a group to help the regenerative farming on your land so you can hold 60 bison. What do you have to prepare in order to be able to bring on more bison?
Yeah, totally. So it's really the fencing, honestly. For us, that's the big piece, because it's not temporary fencing, because this is a big animal, and fencing is really only a deterrent anyways. It's not really going to keep them in if they don't want to stay in. So we don't use like poly wire or electric fencing that you can just take up and put down and things like that. My bull would run right through that. So I've heard of some operations that do use that successfully, but you got to do that when they're calves and very, very young and respect a fence. When they're 6, 8 years old, they're going to look at that fence and just walk right through it. So, so a big piece of it is putting up the the big posts and the 5-foot high wire and the multi-strands, and a couple of our wires are hot, they are electrified. So we're in the process right now of, we don't have a huge property either. Like we only have them on about 64 acres. So it's not one of those things where you have to have hundreds or thousands of acres to have all these animals to do some great things for the environment. You really just have to be pretty particular and understand, the soil cycle and how those animals interact with it to be able to get the biggest bang for your buck there. So on 64 acres, I'm going to have like 65 animals. And what we do is we just make those pastures about like 2 to 3 acres a piece, instead of what we have right now, anywhere from like 4 to 12 acres a piece. So just to rotate them better throughout that grass, to mimic what they would have done in nature originally. They would just stay in one space for a day or so, really eat everything, and then they would move on and not come back for quite some time. So we've done a lot of work from that perspective, because that's not my background. My background is nursing, like I said. So it's been like this amazing, exchange of knowledge and this journey myself that I've been going through, learning about that regenerative piece, which I feel like I know and I see pieces of that, but being able to verbalize it and make it work for my piece of property specifically is kind of where, I wanted to dial all that in. So yeah.
I agree. When you learn about regenerative farming, it makes sense. You understand it. It's very intuitive, but then to have to regurgitate it and try to explain it to another person, or then apply it to your land, it becomes suddenly more complicated, and you just need like guidance to do it.
Yeah.
Even though it almost seems like it's this life skill that we should have all grown up being taught, because it's just basically understanding the seasons that we live in and understanding our land and knowing, being able to see the signs of what it needs and being able to help give it what it needs.
Yeah, it's an ancient wisdom that I feel like we've kind of lost in our techie, savvy worlds of ourselves. And it's like putting those pieces together. Like we are part of this world and this, biodiversity, and the seasons affect us just as much as they do those animals that are out there too, and so when you start to really observe that and, make all those connections, it's this beautiful, mindset and space where, all that is working together, and you start to pick up on those little nuances that Mother Nature is just trying to tell you, that something's not quite jiving, and maybe you make a little adjustment, whether it's for yourself or whether it's for your animals, and then things go abundantly from there, which is kind of cool.
Now, do the bison help build up the topsoil so you have more rich soil on your land?
Yeah, most definitely. So the bison and ruminants in general are made, they've got those hooves that it's kind of like two, I don't know what the term is that I'm thinking of right now. So, but there's like two pieces to that hoof. So it actually looks, it's kind of like what you would do in gardening, with a spade, and you would like press the earth down, put a seed in, and release it. So the bison just do that for you. And then they're kind of like a fertilizing machine as well, right? So they're pressing the ground in, eating the grass and moving it all around and depositing the seeds. And then they walk away, and then they poop and they fertilize it for you. And then that's it. It's like this beautiful machine that Mother Nature just created. And this is just how this cycle works. You just have to let it do its thing.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
So that's been a huge lesson for me, is a lesson in patience. Mother Nature has her own pace, and you got to go with that, learning to be as patient as Mother Nature is really tough in our day and time, I feel like. So that was a really tough lesson for me, but well worth it.
So is there an area on the farm where you keep the bison for a season and then you move them to the next spot, or how often are you rotating them to a different part of your land?
Yeah, so we try and rotate. In the winter, it's a little bit different just because it's so cold. So we only rotate between a few pastures in the winter just because we put a lot of hay down. But that's still part of the regenerative piece, is because those pastures we choose to use in the winter are typically pastures that really need some rehab, really briars and woods, and we're trying to reclaim some of that space, because the theory there too is that the majority of our landscape probably was not nearly as heavily wooded as we think it is, like closed canopy wooded.
Really?
They think it was more savanna-esque, where trees, big, huge oaks that can flourish in the sunlight, and then grasslands and trees everywhere, but enough so each tree gets enough sunlight. And it's not like that closed canopy. You know, they actually think there were very few places where there truly would have been a closed canopy forest. So we are kind of helping that out, right? So we put the bison in certain places throughout the winter where we put hay in and get out some of those briars and some of those smaller trees, or trees that just aren't as healthy, to allow some of that sunlight to come in, not only to grow grass, but to grow some of these trees bigger and help them have a more robust life as well. So, and then once the grass grows, we rotate them every couple days, you know, throughout the pasture, but then they won't see the same pasture for like 40 or 45 days or so.
Got it.
So, yeah.
So how did you find people in your community to help teach you about your land and how to restore it?
Yeah. So to be honest with you, it wasn't really directly in my community. That was the hard part, because nobody really does that where we are, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
It's starting to be more talked about, but we're in an area where there's a lot of old school farmers, right? So, and a lot of them look at our perspective kind of like, why would you do that? And we're like, well, why would you do that? So, but there's more and more younger, you know, farmers coming up who want to make a big difference in the land and do a lot of that regenerative stuff. So we are seeing more of that. But I had to kind of reach out all over the nation. You know, I had consultants that were out west, and luckily I found a local savory hub that's based in Virginia, which is pretty darn close. That's only 3 hours from us. So that ended up being a wonderful relationship that we built there, and that was very local. So that was so exciting. So yeah.
What are the farmers doing that currently live around you? What are they?
Yeah. So I mean, all kinds of things, right? So, but just keeping cows on the same pasture all year. And like, it's 100 acres and they just have, you know, 20 cows, and they're just on the same pasture all the time, you know, and then they have to feed a lot of hay or grain, and, you know, wonder why season to season they don't get much grass, or just, yeah, there's just a lot of old school thought, you know, put into it, and they're overgrazing those pastures is what it is. And so those pastures can never fully recover. Yeah. And then they're having to have, you know, less and less animals on that pasture. They think that's the answer. So it's just a lot of that old school mentality with, you know, they think they need more space. But you just have to utilize your space better, is what it is. You don't really need more acreage. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good reflection that you can apply to wherever you live.
Totally.
You don't necessarily need more space. You just need to be more mindful about the space that you have and use it in like a new efficient way. Yes.
Yeah. You can do so much with 5 acres, you know. I mean, I don't recommend bison for 5 acres, but there's lots of other animals you can put, you know, out, and a lot of other things you can do with 5 acres that people just don't realize. They think that you have to have a lot of land to farm or get into any type of agricultural business, and that's just not true. So, and it's coming, you know, a lot of new and beginning farmers, you know, are obviously on board with that. And so you see more and more of that coming out there. So, yeah.
That's good to know for us dreamers that want to be joining the party.
Totally.
Only need 5 acres to start.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about bison meat and bison from a culinary perspective, because it's something that I've been eating and working with for a very long time. But all I ever see out here in California and at grocery stores is ground bison and very occasionally a bison steak. Is there a reason why that's all we ever see? Like, where's the rest of the bison going?
Yeah, totally. So usually to restaurants is where it is, because that's what those restaurants want. They want the steaks. And on an animal, typically on an animal, about 40% of it is ground. So there's a lot of that to go around.
Got it.
The steaks though, man, there's only, gosh, if I had to think about a 1,200 pound animal, steak wise, 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe 40 pounds of steaks on that animal. So depending on, what you get cut, but yeah, so there's not a lot of steaks, and that's probably why, is because those restaurants are typically buying them up to serve to folks, because they're also able to make the margin probably a little bit easier on that as well. Because bison is a little more expensive. It is a little tougher of an animal to raise from the aspect of infrastructure, I should say. Because to be honest with you, my daily life is pretty hands off, which is really nice. But the infrastructure investment is definitely a lot more than what you would typically do with beef. So definitely commands, a little bit of a higher price tag too. But gosh, we sell and get as much meat off of an animal as humanly possible. And we have a beautiful relationship with our local butcher, and they're always looking at more ways to get more stuff out of this bison so that we can sell it or eat it or whatever we want to do with it. So, we use as many of the organs as possible. We do the tongue, we do the heart, we do liver, we do kidneys, we do Rocky Mountain oysters, we do oxtail, we do head cheese. I shouldn't say head cheese. I should say sweetbreads. So the sweetbreads are actually like the cheek and stuff. The head cheese is technically the brain, which we do not get that back just because that is how the animal is put down. So our animal is shot directly into the head. So you don't want the brains after that. But animals that you either can knock them out or just slice, a carotid artery, you can use the brains. That's typically like pigs. It's really hard to do something like that with a cow. But there are some cultures that do that. So we really try hard to utilize as much as we can. And I know there's even some more stuff that I could utilize, like the lungs and the trachea. I know those are really big right now for dog health food, in the dog market and things like that. So we're looking into that. I don't know of many people who eat lung and trachea. People do all kinds of stuff, and you can definitely put a lot of stuff into like a big stew. And it comes out beautifully actually, and has an amazing amount of nutrients. And then we also do the bones obviously too. So we try very hard to get as many bones back as we humanly possibly can for the bone broth aspect. And then also, we've got 3 farm dogs. We feed them all bison all the time.
Oh,
so
dogs.
Yes, they are very lucky dogs. We even try as much as possible, if I can, to get the hooves back, because the dogs really love the hooves as well. And that's really good for their digestive system. So I just don't want to waste the animal. So whether it's for human consumption or for pet consumption, not a problem. There are some places as well for bison, they actually grind up the bone and then they put it into dog food as well. There's a big market for that. So a lot of the processors out west, actually, that's what a lot of them do with their bones, is there's a pretty decent market for that ground up bone that they actually put into dog food. There's so much to an animal. And we want to offer all of that to people. And we actually sell, we sell most of it. I can't keep liver in stock is one of those things.
No way.
Depending on the year or the time of the year, heart, sometimes I keep that in stock, but a lot of people like to make heart stew. So that's really popular in the cooler months. Yeah. And then tongue tacos are super popular. So I can't keep the tongue in stock either.
I've been
So,
hearing about that, and I'm
yeah.
really wanting to try that.
Yes. Yeah. I hear that's really good too. We're going to have a chef come out and do a cooking demonstration with us next month, actually, to do tongue tacos, because I'm kind of curious. So,
Yeah, I hear that's really good. I've been
yeah.
wanting to try that. With heart, does heart need to be fresh, or can you use a frozen heart?
Yeah, you can use a frozen heart, most definitely.
Okay.
Yep,
And
most definitely.
a soup is one of the best ways to prepare it.
Yeah, probably one of the easiest ways, honestly. Yeah, gosh, the heart, you think about that, like, that's the most important muscle in the body. So
Yeah.
talk about nutrients, that's where they all go first. So yeah, so that's a really great way to utilize the heart, because the heart is it's pretty potent. It's got a lot, because there's a lot of nutrients in it, so it's got a lot of flavor. I wouldn't say like liver has that metallic-y taste to it, just because it's a filter in the body. But it's got a lot of flavor, like a lot of density to it. The heart's the same way. So if you put it in a stew, that has a lot of other things in it, it just lends itself to a nice blending. And so that's how folks prefer to eat it. But I mean, I've heard of lots of people just cooking it up on the grill too. And you can really do anything with meat as long as it's cooked appropriately, like cooked through.
Cooked and seasoned.
I mean,
yes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could eat it rare too, but, and some people eat raw liver, it just is, you can technically eat it that way. So
have you guys done any organ meat sausages?
we have not. And, I've had a couple of people ask about that, and I do want to explore that more. Because I think that would be a great way to get some flavor and make it super easy for folks to cook. Sausage is so popular. We're working with our butcher right now to get a good sausage blend, just because bison is so lean.
I know
that typically they have to put a fat back into it. And our bison are not grain fed, right? They're all grass finished. So our bison are very lean, which is how they're meant to be. So sometimes they get away with it with bison that are grain finished, because they do get a pretty decent fat cap on there, and then they can take that fat and put it into brats or hot dogs or things like that. But we don't have that. So we're trying to play around with something that actually tastes good for a sausage. And we've talked about the organ meat, and we may go there. Typically what butchers want to do is they want to use pork fat in with the bison. And I've been such a I've been so picky about that I was like, I don't know, I'm such a purist sometimes, and I get in my own way, I know. But I mean, if it's good, obviously we've got lovely pig farmers all around us and things like that, and we could definitely use pig fat from there. But I don't know, I hesitate to do that. Like, a lot of jerky on the market right now is cut with pig fat, and it's actually the first ingredient instead of the bison. It's pig fat and then bison. And I don't love that. I just feel like it's a little misleading. Everyone's like, oh, this bison tastes so good. And you're like, well, it's because it's basically pig fat. So, which is another thing too, kind of leads me to is, in the grocery store, sometimes you get bison that is 80-20, which is amazing to me, because I don't even know how they can put so much fat back into bison to get it to be that way. But some of those big processors do that because they think the consumer is not smart enough to cook it appropriately. And so they keep the fat in there, or they put more fat into it. And I feel like that's also very misleading. Bison is not a fatty meat like that. When you have an 80-20 burger, that's a pretty fatty burger, a beef burger. And so if you're having 80-20 bison, why would you even buy it? So it's just one of those things. Labels are super important when if you're not buying directly from the farmer and know exactly what you're getting. Those labels, gosh, you've got to look at them so close. So
and still not everything has to be there. So just like we were chatting about earlier, I really think that we're going to be moving into a time where the only way you can trust the proteins that you're purchasing is buying it direct from the farm. And I think we're all going to be investing in more freezer space. Just because, labels aren't clear. And I think more of us want to know where our meat is actually coming from, and knowing that what's actually put into the package is what they say it is.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to read an ingredients list sometimes, especially in sausage, you know, you'd be
Yes.
surprised what they put in those sausages. So yeah, it really comes down to knowing who your farmer is, you know, knowing where that meat comes from. And I agree that does take a little bit of extra work originally. But once you get into the habit of doing that and going to the farmer's market or just getting on that farmer's list, you're like, oh yeah, okay. Or you go and you buy in bulk, right? So you plan a little bit ahead. You have an extra deep freezer and you buy pork for, you know, the first 3 months of the year and you're good to go. And then you don't have to think about it again. And then, you know, it's good, clean pork. And you can do that with bison. You can do that with beef. And I highly recommend people do that. I think that's really the way to go, because the grocery stores, it's tough, but I get it. You know, we're busy people. You know, my whole thing always is, my rule is 80-20, you know, 80% of the time I'm locked in, you know, 20% of the time I get it. I'm busy. I've got a 2-year-old running around. Sometimes you just got to go down the grocery store and you got to get some eggs. Like, I don't know.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
So how do you guys sell your bison? Is it 100% online? Do you guys also do farmers markets? How are people able to purchase what's coming from your farm?
Yeah, so we actually do mostly farmers market sales and off of the farm. So we've got a farm store that we're actually revamping this year. We've got a new farm store, so that's exciting. We definitely offer online sales. Like if people want to pre-purchase something and then I can bring it to them, we do deliver orders of $100 or more within like our radius. We do that. So it's definitely primarily at the farmers markets where I'm, you know, talking face to face to people every day about, you know, our products and how to cook it and things like that, which, to be honest with you, I prefer it that way.
People around you are very, very lucky. Are you at farmers markets in West Virginia, or do you guys go into Maryland too?
Yeah. So actually, we've kind of been all over the place. Gosh, this year we're like right on the border of West Virginia and Maryland. So we're going to do a farmer's market in Maryland this year. And we're going to just continue to do the farm store in West Virginia. And then we actually do a bunch of farmers markets. I shouldn't say a bunch. We do 2 farmers markets down in Virginia Beach.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we have kind of a dual presence just because my husband's still active duty and that's where he's stationed. So I was like, well, heck, if I'm going to come over here to see you, I might as well bring meat with me and do a market.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to see you, but I'm going to spend 4 hours at the market, you know? So, so we do that. And that's been really good because there's no bison in Virginia Beach, right? So that's really easy. You know, it's definitely a niche market that it's pretty convenient for us. So, so we've been playing around with different things over the years, honestly, you know, a bunch of different things.
Have you ever gone to the Dupont Circle Farmers Market in Washington, D.C.?
I have personally, because we were stationed there a few years ago, and yes, that's a wonderful farmers market, but I have not been a vendor there per se. So yeah, we thought about doing that, and you know, we were kind of back and forth about it. It's a little travel time for us. So we've been talking to some more restaurants in the DC area. So we'll kind of see how that works out this year. But yeah, there's lots of opportunity out there, you know, for farmers to get into these markets, especially in these metropolitan areas. You know, I know sometimes it's a pain in the butt to do, but if you can get in there and go set up on a Wednesday or a Friday or a Saturday and, you know, get all these people in these high-rise buildings to come to you for your meat.
Yeah.
Easy sell. Easy. You know, like I'm one farmer, like I can only have so much product, right? And so if I bring it to a place where there's just like so many people, that's easy sell.
Well, yeah. I mean, myself and my clients would stock up on your bison. Like we would buy a whole bison and break it down in the market.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh gosh. Yeah.
That would go pretty fast. Do you have any families that ever do that go in on a whole bison? Like people do?
I haven't had anybody do a whole bison. We do quarter bison.
Okay.
So people occasionally, you know, a few times a year we'll have somebody come and, you know, get a quarter animal to stock up their freezers with. So yeah, that's becoming more and more popular. I see that happening more and more every year we do this. Okay. So yeah.
Good to know. I might wrangle some people together.
I know, that would be
See what
so
we can
cool.
do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll be sending my brother from Washington, D.C. to drive out to your farm stand.
Ah, there you go. Nice. He's so close.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, everyone that lives in your area is so lucky because they have access to people like you and farmers that are doing some sort of regenerative farming or holistic agriculture on their land and doing something a little bit different and really offering what a lot of us that are down this rabbit hole that are really trying to find good food to nourish our body. There's so much more access, I feel like, where you are on the East Coast. And I don't know if it's because of your weather or your green rolling hills or what it is, but I feel like there's so many more people quietly doing what you're doing. Do you feel like that? Or do you still feel like you guys are?
I could see that. I mean, I could definitely see that there's a lot more small farmers kind of in our area. California, especially, right? Like that's a really big place traditionally. I guess I shouldn't say traditionally, but over the past few decades, it's been easier for larger corporations to get out there and have lots of land, irrigate it, and then they push those small farmers out, right?
Yes. The state's
which is
not
unfortunate
set up to support.
Yeah. So I mean, California has been set up to feed the entire nation instead of just feed Californians, so that is an interesting thing, but I do see that transitioning. You'd be surprised how many little farmers are kind of tucked in every little place, and to find those farmers, you just got to find your farmers markets. And then once you find a few farmers markets you start finding a few more farmers, and then you find a few more, and then a few more. And you're like, oh my gosh, all these people are just tucked in all these little places. So I do think it's becoming a lot more popular. It's just, they're all small farmers. And so there's only so much marketing they can do from that aspect. So, yeah.
So for people that aren't able to get to your farm stand or to a farmer's market where you're at, what do you suggest people look for when they're trying to buy bison?
Totally. Grass-fed and finished is my first thing. But that's really hard to do if you go into a grocery store, honestly. Even Whole Foods doesn't have grass-finished bison.
Yeah.
So to be honest with you, there's a couple companies that I love and adore and are companies that I would like to be when I grow up type thing. Bison folks that have helped me, start our ranch. A big one is Wild Idea Bison. That was that's a beautiful ranch they have out in the Dakotas, and they field harvest their animals, and they are truly transparent about their regenerative practices, and they are now big enough. Dan O'Brien has owned that company for a long time and has been doing this for decades now, I think since the 80s. They ship all over the place, actually. So they have the capacity to do that, and they do that very well. And then North Star Bison up in Wisconsin actually does a beautiful job with that as well. Marielle Hewitt is one of the ladies, at the helm up there. And, I always used to be like, I want to be you when I grow up, basically. I mean, we're roughly the same age, but they have a beautiful operation up there in Wisconsin, all grass-fed, grass-finished, and field harvested, and have really done it to scale and done it very, very well, and have stayed committed to those, transparent, regenerative practices, even while scaling themselves up. So they've got a nice operation too, and they also ship all over the place. And so I recommend people get their bison from places like that instead of at the grocery store, honestly. I do think the grocery store may start to do a better job, but it's coming. So I don't know. Right now, I think it's hit or miss.
Those are really good tips. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. So anything in particular, as we're transitioning into spring, is there anything that you're really into cooking or eating right now?
Oh gosh, I have been playing around right now with breakfast. I love breakfast. Breakfast is like my favorite meal of the day. And I have been trying to incorporate bison into breakfast, which I actually recently just published a cookbook. And so that is on my website of all the different ways and things you can make bison. I shouldn't say all of the ways, but all the ways that we as a Riffle family prefer to make bison. So it's like 24 different recipes that you can use. But I've really been playing around with breakfast items. So bison in and of itself is kind of a sweet meat. So I love to, pair it with sweet potatoes and eggs and kind of all fry it up in a nice little bake in a big, cast iron pan. And so I've been playing around with that a lot. The thing is that bison doesn't have a lot of fat in it, right? So you just have to watch how you cook that, and you can't overcook bison or else it becomes pretty tough to eat. So that's kind of that's why there's some play with it. It's because it's just it's like chicken, it's really easy to overcook chicken. So it just takes a little bit of a finesse and a technique in the kitchen. But yeah, we've just been playing around with different flavors with it because it's got a fun flavor in and of itself. I feel like it's a little sweet, kind of like a hazelnutty taste to it. So so that's kind of been my thing right now. It's bison breakfast. So
very nice. Is that what you had this morning?
I did actually. Yes. Yeah. I did this morning cut it with a pork sausage. So like with all that sage and stuff in it, just to kind of mix it. We've got some family in town, so it not only made a lot, which was nice, but it just gave it a little bit of a different flavor and then added a little bit of extra fat to it too. So yes, that was a good combo. But yeah.
Well, where can people go to find and learn more about your farm and get your cookbook?
Totally. So directly on our website, www.rifflefarms.com. You can learn all about us there, and you can definitely pick up a cookbook. And there's an ebook too. So even if you don't want like the print version, or you just want to put it on your iPad or something like that, you can get that there. So,
well, congratulations on putting that together. That takes a lot of work, the cookbook.
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
Well done.
So, yeah.
Well, and I always like to ask the person I'm chatting with, if they could share just like one piece of health advice or health wisdom that they've learned along their journey with the listener that they could consider incorporating into their life. What would that be? Is there one little tip that you can share with anyone that's listening to this conversation today?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I go back to the know your farmer. Got to know your farmer. And if you do, then I feel like everything else just falls into place. So if you know where your food's coming from, yeah, hands down, that's the best way.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Liz. This was just a fantastic conversation. I'm really grateful that I learned more about bison because I think this is such a meat that more and more people are eating, but they kind of don't know anything about. And so this was really good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for chatting.
All right.